Hello guys, you're live again. It's like, let me share my screen before I forget, like yesterday, because I'm old. I forget things. So let's get this back here. All right. So today we're going to be talking about ice. That's going to be the only thing we're going to be talking about the whole class today. I have plenty to talk about. Yesterday we did some of the painting, right? Like I posted some of like one screenshot just to show how it looks like right now. But what is Roger is laughing there, man. What's going on with him?
She just broke me with the comment. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm too old, man. Too old for this. So what I did here today, because in the past like couple of classes, obviously, I was experimenting with different types of eye models. So I mentioned that I have one that has like a kind of like an offset that I have basically, let me just show you very quickly. I'm gonna go into this. So this one basically there is an extrusion. So there is like an inner wall in here, right? So there is some thickness for the cornea itself. And this is the one that I used more recently for Jessica. But then this one here is the one I use for most of my models. That's just like a simple, one-sided cage, right? So let's talk a little bit about this. So I brought them, basically like those ones that are here are Jessica's eyes, and this one's here is Stan Winston. And those are the ones I had in one of my first ones when we were talking about the eyes distance. Remember, like the distance between the pupils, and it's like the size of the eyeball in relation to the iris, right? Like it was 24 millimeters against 12, so basically like double the size of the size of the iris, right? But then we didn't talk about like how the whole thing was constructed. So when I started modeling this eye here, you see like that I have like this little lens in the front, right? So it's basically like the sphere is a perfect sphere, and then there's this little lens right in front of it. So the way I approached this when I first modeled, as you can tell, like by the star right here in the back, right? I normally start with a regular sphere. So for example, I can do a couple of things here. I can do like a create and then polygon primitives, and I could just say like a sphere here. And let's just create one layer. Let's see where it is, right there. So if I start with something like this, right? Let's just add more subdivisions here. So let's do, if I scroll down here, let's make it like super heavy. Let's duplicate it first. So let's get this guy with, let's see, let's duplicate it. And then let's get this one here, that's a duplicate. Let's move around 90, so I know what it is. And this one here is the one that has the history. So I'm gonna just increment the subdivisions. Let's try 60 by 60, something like that. So it's a very heavy version of it. And then this one's gonna be 90 as well. So I'm gonna keep this one matching the other one because I wanna keep a higher resolution mesh at all times as my buffer. That's what I do when I model hard surface stuff as well. For example, like a good example is like Bumblebee. When I model Bumblebee, like most of the forms, like the forearms and stuff, they are very like simple primitives, just to keep like it's like kind of like an oval shape, like for the forearms. And then I kept like a very high res mesh, heavier than this actually, as a buffer at all times. So I could cut everything I wanted to remodel and add all the cuts, and then at any time I could just like rely on the base model that's in there, like the main shape, and I would just like shrink wrap it, and then it was all perfect, so the curvature is always perfect. You look across, it's like there are holes and everything, but the curvature is pretty perfect because of that. So I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna keep that little model in the back, and then I'm gonna switch back to this lower resolution model here. And then if I hide everything, that's basically the way I approach, it's like I get like some of, I would say like even for this guy here, let's do with a little bit less. Yeah, I could start with the 8x8, I would say. I think like I start too high resolution here. But with 8x8, what I normally do, even if I start with this guy here is fine too. I just like select a couple of those guys. And I'm gonna keep, for example, let's delete those guys here. I'm gonna keep just like a cross at the top. Something like that, right? So basically what I can do, I can actually cut this and then connect them around here, for example, just to have this like as actual, you know, as a better topology, I would say, for what I need, which like in this case here, if you have too much like stars, like a star, for example, right here, that would cause a lot of trouble. You know, it's like you rather have something like this that's much more of you know, it's like a more controlled topology that you can actually subdivide and get this stuff to subdivide perfectly, because the stars are going to get some just in there. The thing is, like the example I'm using here, let me do like the right way with a little 8 sides sphere first. So let's do a okay, primitive with the sphere. So let's get this one here. Let's do our 8 side one. Let's see, Ctrl H. Let's bring it back here. Let's see what's the size I had before, which was that 12, 6, 18. So let's transfer that to this guy right here. All right, transfer that right there. Oops, thought I was selecting everything. And then I'm gonna just remove the subdivision. So let's put like 8 to start. And then here, let's start like maybe 12. Something very low res, even less. Let's see, 8 by 8. Okay, so that way here, I can actually organize my topology the way I want. So basically, like what I was saying, if you subdivide this sphere here the way it is, right? So if I have something like this on that side, and I have something like this in the other side, right? Like I have this star in there, and I have now that topology. So if I subdivide this, let's look what's going to happen. So go to your mesh and then smooth. Let's do a smooth 1. So I get something like this. This is the topology I want for the front of my eye, right? And this is definitely not what I want in there. That's the whole reason I deleted those edges, so I get like a nice square topology in there. Because if you have anything like this, when you subdivide, it's more likely you're gonna get some pinching. And we do need that surface in front of the corner to be a perfect mirror, so we cannot have any pinching. Otherwise, it's gonna, you know, create all kinds of artifacts, not gonna look like a smooth surface, right? So that's why I did this just for the front. So if I bring this one now, you see like I had just like 8 subdivision levels for both vertical and horizontal. So now when I subdivided it, because of the lack of subdivisions, the model looks like an oval shape. See, it's kind of oval right now. So if I bring it back to there at 90, now it's kind of like you're gonna notice that this shrink a lot, right? So basically, like that's why I have that sphere in there, is because at any time I can just like conform it back to it slightly like that. Doesn't need to be perfect. And then now I can generate like a perfect surface by projecting it. So basically, like you can pick the high resolution one and then pick the low resolution one with shift. You can go to mesh and then transfer attributes, click in the option box, and then you can just say like vertex position, turn off everything else. And then you can just say based on world, and that's it. So now when you do that, if I delete my history, if I hide this guy here, now it's back to a perfect, you know, topology and circle, right? Like it's kind of conform to that higher, you know, resolution. At any time, obviously, in my case here, I think I had more resolution than this. You see, like there's more resolution, so you can subdivide once more if you want to. So I can smooth it out. So it's probably like shrinking a little bit more, right? Because of my smooth in there. So now I can reconform. So I'm gonna get the outer one, which is like the higher resolution one. Then shift, I'm gonna pick this one. I'm gonna do the same mesh, transfer attributes. Again, like just the vertex position, blah, 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 apply. and then boom, it just snaps back to it, right? So the way I built the front of it, that little lens in there, was by creating a copy of this, for example, and just offsetting. And then obviously you're gonna have to measure it, right? Because you wanna make sure that you have like the size of the iris has to be half of the size of the eyeball, right? Like the radius in there. So you're gonna have to do that and see if you're gonna have to stretch a little bit. But the fact is, like, you have to have something like this as a buffer as well. So you keep something like this. Let's say if I shrink even more like that, until you have something that conforms to that proportion that we had before. And then you can do the same. You can actually get the new model that you just subdivided, which is not this one, is this one right there, right? And you can even use that one to snap with it, right? Like, but the thing is, like, you're gonna have to use some of those loops in here to create like a better match for it. So for example, like if I have this outer loop right here, right? It's better if I actually conform it to make sure that it's perfect with that surface in there, and then I can project it. So basically, like, I would have to snap those edges in here around that, maybe shrink the inner part, and then I can project the whole thing. Or we can just do this. Let's see if I can do this right now. Let's see. Control C. Let's just unhide this guy here. Let's, for example, if I have something like that, let me just combine both of them. So we're gonna combine both objects, and let's try to project this one. Maybe I'm gonna have to pull a little bit the top of it just to make sure you get a little better match. So I'm gonna get that one in there, right in the middle. I'm gonna press B for soft selection, right? And then slide it and then bring it up, something like that. And now that it's close enough, you can try to do this. So get this model in there, get this outer model, mesh, transfer attributes, apply. You got the shrink wrap in there. So, you know, it's like you're gonna have to do more carefully than I'm doing here, obviously, but that's kind of like the principle of it, you know? It's to have something like a model we can actually fall back to. And then obviously around this area here, you're gonna have to have more subdivision, right? That's what I'm saying there. You have to have like a nice circular, you know, topology there. So you get like something like this. Oops, something like this, right? So you have enough edges that you can actually, you know, build on top of that and then project everything at the end. But the important part that I'm saying here is that you have everything square right here in the middle. You see like my triangle, not triangles, but the three sides edges here, three edges, they're all on the sides in here. They're not right in the middle. And even those ones here, they're not gonna cause a lot of trouble. But this one's here definitely gonna cause trouble, something like that. See like a star in there and, you know, multi-side. So that's the way I started the topology of it, right? Very similar approach. So let's take a look at the model itself in ZBrush now, how it's constructed. So once I had that topology done, that looks like this, right? You can either build the way that I did, or you can just like start with the sphere and then cut the sphere and then cut a hole in the other one and then reattach it and just make sure the transition works fine. As long as you get something that looks similar to this, doesn't matter what approach you're gonna have. But it's also very cool to keep like those buffer objects in there so you can actually re-snap at all times, because remember, if something is pinching, this is gonna affect the surface and it's not gonna be pretty when you subdivide it. So that's basically the topology for it. In terms of the UVs, another thing that's very important to notice, if you go to Windows, Modeling Editor, UV Editor, so you're gonna notice that my UVs look like this, right? So they are smooth just inside, but they're not smooth on the borders, right? And then what I'm doing here, basically, I cut the model in half because it's almost impossible you're going to be able to see other than, you know, the front of the eye in here. You're going to have to rotate the eye quite a lot to be able to review anything behind that line. So what I did, I cut it in there, and I'm using this entire center area for the front of the eye. And then that tiny little area in there is for the back of the eye. So my UVs and displacement maps and color map, they're all like compressed into that little tiny thing in there. and most of my texture goes in here. This way I can actually use a 4K map and get plenty of detail around this, right? Because remember, this is just for the cornea itself, right? Sorry, for the sclera itself. It's not for the iris, right? And then obviously I'm using unfolding here and basically like pinning the borders, and then using unfold to make sure that I have everything you know, unfolded. So all those things are, you know, it's like you can paint this in 2D if you want. But the important thing is like keep everything exactly right in the middle. So the distance, you know, is like in the bottom, top, and the sides have to be the same, because we're going to be using a lot of radial or circular ramp maps. And the ramp maps, you're going to be controlling like how much we're going to be fading to reveal more or less of the iris. So it's important that you have like very much in the center, you know. So that's the main thing right here. For the, let's just like hide this guy and let's show the iris in here. The iris I have is just like a disc, right? I don't have like the entire surface. I'm gonna be looking at it in ZBrush. And this is the same principle. It's right in the middle of the UV space. So make sure that like the distance is right at the, you know, it's like the same distance on the sides. And then this is basically like it was created, I think like I started, was in ZBrush, I believe, and then I unfolded here the rest of it. So yeah, it's like this one here actually is kind of squarish. I think I would benefit of if I subdivided this. Actually, I know what's going on here. I think what's happening is that I'm exporting the mesh the way it is here straight from ZBrush, and ZBrush is not subdividing anything. So basically, like it's starting from the lower res and then creating the entire thing like without any subdivision. So I have to make sure that I match the settings here in Arnold when I go to my subdivision settings, you know, to make sure that the displacement is not going to screw up everything. So I think that's exactly what is happening there. So let's look at the model itself here in ZBrush. And then, so for the first one, we have the sclera itself. If I subdivide it, that's basically what I have painted. I started with a very broad color, which like the same principle we started yesterday with the albedo, right? The very broad noise brush, right? Just to get those bigger stains in there. And then I kind of like build more towards the white. So right in the middle here is completely white. But remember that this entire area is going to go transparent once you have like the transparency map in there. So I'm more concerned about this area here, this transition, because starting here, we're definitely going to see those colors. So closer to this white area, I start going like light yellow in certain areas. And around here, for example, some oranges and you know, light yellow. And then for everything else, like all those veins, they are painted the same way I was showing you guys yesterday, the vein brush that I have. So let's see, micro vein, not this one here. Let's see, yesterday I got lost again. Let's see, vein, blah, 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 veins, this one. So if I have this one here, the red, the only thing I did here differently from yesterday is that I was using the Z add as well. So as I was sculpting, I was actually adding some color, right? So you can crank the intensity of your color in there and like some red stuff. So basically like I can paint and sculpt at the same time. So I used a lot of that little lightning that I used for the micro veins yesterday. And a couple of them are, those are basically like hand sculpted, as you can tell, with those little guys. So basically like using the standard brush and using like a Z add and RGB at the same time, just to create those little guys in here. But you see, like, if you look close, they're not like super realistic, right? Kind of like, especially those guys. So we have to make sure that the UVs are in the right spot before you do this. And this is going to be very important for when we render stuff, because that's what's going to be breaking up the specular. And that's what's going to add a lot of realism, you know, because this area here is going to be mirror. Yeah, if you had like any undulation in this area, imagine like that you have a lens in front of your eye, and you can have any undulation, you're going to start seeing everything distorted, right? So it has to be a perfect surface right there. But then when you look at the renders themselves, so you're going to get something like this. So this is rendered from this scene at this angle right here. And then you're gonna see like on top of those veins and everything, you're gonna see the breakups, right? So that's gonna be important, like when you look from like the sides and everything, you're gonna see those veins breaking up the surface like that. And that's gonna add some realism as well. So so it's important to have that with a good amount of displacement, you know, not crazy, but I mean like displacing enough of the surface so you can actually have a nice breakup, you know. So that's basically it. I mean, like color-wise, it's a mixed bag, right? You're gonna find like reference for eyes, real eyes, which are like kind of like blood red, like super red around this area here. Some of them a little bit more pale, you know, and then obviously some of them gonna have even much more veins than this. But in this case here, I'm just like painting it up kind of like, again, is a kind of like an idealized version of it. It's not like based on a real human eye, right? But it works for the purpose here. Then we're gonna switch to the iris itself. So the iris itself was sculpted as a disc, like I mentioned, because you have to remember that around, if I make it transparent here, let's see. Transparent without the ghost. So you have to remember that around this area here, we're gonna add a transparency map, right? So the transparency should not go as far as revealing this edge here at all. So we're always gonna stop a little bit before that, right? So there's no reason to have like a lot of geometry in there, have the full, you know, it's like sphere in there if I'm never gonna see it. So I tried to be economic because my intention was to actually bring a mid-resolution of this this model, the iris model, back to ZBrush. And the reason is that I have a lots of ins and outs in the, so for example, like you see like my base mesh, it looks like this, right? It's a disk. Let me put like, you know, the side here so I can see it's kind of like a mushroom in there, right? So I have the disk. It has a little bit of, let's put against this one here so I can see how it contrasts with it. So you see like there's a tiny little offset between the two, but it's pretty close to it, right? Ideally, I have to go even closer than that, but I think I was starting to get some intersection. That's why I shrank it a little bit. But it's basically like it runs parallel to the outside, right? And then basically like I just chopped it right there. It was basically a sphere before, and I chopped right there, and then extruded the middle, because in real life you're gonna have a hole in there, and you also have a lens right here in the middle. But that lens is almost like we don't need to see, because all you see is like a void, right? You can have the lens in there just in case, for example, if you want to simulate like some kind of like a light hitting that one and kind of like illuminating the little lens right there, kind of like, you know, flashlight or something like that, that goes like, you know, creates that little ghost effect in there. But overall, it's just like for normal shots, it's basically a void. So, you know, there's no reason. So when I subdivide this thing here, in terms of the anatomy of it, you see like that I'm going like down to conform to the eyeball itself, right? To this glare in there. But then I go down in here and then go down again. So basically there's 2 steps. So I go like down. It's almost like a little volcano in here, kind of shallow volcano, right? Go down and then go down around here again, and then all the way down. And again, like in the spirit of just like trying to imagine how this thing was like in real life by looking at references like the ones we were looking yesterday, which were the, let's see if I pick it up here. If I look for a reference on macro. Look at this thing. What is this stuff like the ads in here? Macro photography eyes. Let's try. Let's see. So yeah, if you look at those ones, you can pick like any of them, right? And you're gonna find all kinds of different, you know, anatomy stuff when it comes to those eyes. And you're gonna see like some of them have this area here more flared out like that. I noticed that when I don't know if it's my impression, but I noticed this like for the most part, like the really brown eyes, they have like a simpler structure overall. You know, it's like they read although those ones have a lot of complexity in there. But you see, like it's still kind of like a rough surface overall, like for the brown eye. And when you look at the blue eyes, you get like a lot of those micro little veins in there, you know, that not veins, but like micro little structures you see that you never notice like in the brown eye. It's almost like the brown eye, it reads a little bit more like a sponge. It's a little bit more spongy. And the blue eyes and the light eyes in general, they have these micro little structures, you know. See like those tiny little ones? And those ones you don't see in the brown eye at all. In the brown eye is like, it's kind of like this type of surface, a little rough, you know. So it's very fascinating to me, like that you get this two different, it looks like different species almost, you know. Like super, I have brown eyes, my wife has blue eyes, and I noticed that, you know, exactly like this. I mean, like her eyes have all those micro little things, and my eyes are like just like a sponge like that, you know. So it's very interesting. So another thing to keep in mind, and also depending on what type of eye you're going to be sculpting, look at many references, you know, and then you're going to see like in betweens, right? You're going to see something that is like in between, like brown and blue in here, and you see some of the rough areas in there, but also some of the microfibers in there, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, you're going to find lots of variations, but in terms of the anatomy of it, I based on a couple of them that I saw. That I kind of like noticed this thing, you know, it's like about the edge being a little bit more raised, and then you go down. This one, the little step here is very small, right? But in some of them, that second step is pretty big. Like this one here. Let's see, there's one is bigger than this. Yeah, even this one here, right? So you have like this raised area goes down. This one actually goes up again, and then there is a, you know, like the hole starts, you know, forming in there. This one has more fibers, right? So you have like one step here and then the other one going down. So that's kind of like the stuff I was observing, you know. And so that's why I built that way. So kind of like, you know, it's like I built going down, it goes up a little bit and it goes down again. I think that was based on a few that I saw similar to this. And so the way I sculpted it was basically like starting from this guy here, super low res, right? Like that disc. And then I used the clay build-up for most of everything. And then I recorded a video, which I already shared with you guys. It's already there for today. So when you watch this class later, you're gonna see this video. So basically, like, this is the time lapse of the entire thing, and it's not sped up, right? It's kind of like, it's just a sped up version from ZBrush, but it's not something I did even more speed up. So basically, like, it's kind of slow, it's kind of easy to follow. That's basically how I blocked everything. And it goes for like 9 minutes or so. So you can actually skip if you want. And then basically like it's building all the structures one by one. It's basically the entire process from beginning to end of how I sculpted it. So I'm not going to be re-sculpting it because that's already done. And I'm basically reusing the same over and over again. So yeah, you have access to it. I think already right now, if you want to go there, I mean, like, it's already available, I believe. So that's the iris sculpture part. And then for the color itself, I'm gonna leave it to you guys because my color is pretty shitty. It looks like this. It's like there's absolutely nothing special. And the reason why, I think I used like some cavity map just to help with some color variation, but still I have some, looks like a baby poop color in here. There is nothing too special. It's because I'm not even trusting this color. I'm using a bunch of ramp maps and recoloring everything in Maya. So I'm gonna be opening the shader network in there and showing you exactly what I have plugged. But it's almost like this becomes like very, you know, of very little importance. In the case of Jessica's eyes, it's a different story because she has this very characteristic little stains like this. So you have like some slightly yellowish and then those browns in here mixed with the blue eye, right? So that's the one I have to actually paint in Photoshop. So I just like opened the map in there and did some painting in Photoshop. Because this guy here, for example, is basically just like ramps that I'm using just to colorize the whole thing, right? But if you want to go specific with little dots and stuff, then you're probably going to have to go in Photoshop and then paint over it, or in ZBrush, right? Like you can do a pass to ZBrush. But in my case here, it's going to be like a super simple map like that. You see that I kept a little bit lighter inside, and then right at the edge, right there, the edge of the little volcano in here, I start making darker, right? And I did this on purpose because when you have like the transparency map, we're going to be blending between transparency and whatever we have in here. I thought it would be cool to catch a little bit of that darkness in here, just to have that little dark halo around the iris, right? But then this is also being used in the color map, like the ramp maps I'm using in there. I'm actually adding a little bit of that halo in here as well. And also that little halo is being created by the shadow that's going to be created by the transparency mapping here. Because remember, when it gets around here, this is still sclera, and this is still like a kind of like a solid piece. And then the transparency starts in here. And then you're going to have a little shadow between the solid part and the transparent part. So you're going to naturally get that area a little darker anyway, but I'm kind of like trying to reinforce it a little bit more. So the reason why let's switch back to this. The reason why I mentioned that I'm exporting like a higher resolution of this mesh back to Maya instead of like a low res like this, it's because I'm trying to avoid a vector displacement, right? Vector displacement, as you can tell, it's a pain in the butt because you have like to basically like do all those tests just to figure out what type of like if the software you're using to render is going to use this or that channel flipped to be able to be compatible with what ZBrush is exporting. So you have to flip channels, and it's always a pain in the butt to just like diagnose what type of vector displacement you're going to be exporting. It's not like a plug and play. So to avoid that headache, I just like, you know what, this is a low res enough. So if I subdivide a couple of times, let's say like 53,000 polys like that, this is still very low res, right? So that's basically what I'm bringing to Maya. It's a 53,000 polys. So it's kind of like, this is the resolution I have around there. And then that way I have enough support that I can actually displace the higher levels on top of it until I get to something like this at render time. Instead of like you rely on the vector displacement, right? Vector displacement is going to add a lot of complication in there. So at the end of the day, I'm just exporting like a regular displacement map on top of the 53,000 polys, which in my case here are just, let's say like this subdivision level 1. So 2, 3, 4. So if I'm exporting a subdivision level 4, the only thing you have to remember is to change the sub-D level to 4 in here, right? When you export the displacement map. And make sure that you match that by exporting this mesh at this resolution back to Maya. So that's basically like the little trick I'm using there. The last piece here when it comes to topology itself and the model, it's this caruncula here, which is the little tier line, not the tier line, but the little corner in there, right? And you see like how crappy it is? It's because like a lot of those veins I painted in here and all this stuff, I just added for effect, so like they are barely visible because I'm also recolorizing this map almost entirely in Maya until my liking, right? And then I always like keep thinking about, okay, I'm gonna just incorporate those colors I tweaked in Maya back in here. I'm gonna paint like a decent map with the thinner, veins, a little bit more refined and all that stuff. But then I always keep like, you know what, it's working for what it is, and I just like get lazy of it. But you see like how rough the whole thing is here. This caruncula, normally when I bring back to the model itself, I tend to pull this around like this corner here, for example. I tweak it until it's a little bit closer to the surface in Maya, because in Maya, it's like basically like it's gonna be where I'm gonna be trusting it anyway. So I kind of like make sure that everything is a little bit more, sorry, a little bit more conform to the surface. And then what's going to happen here is that we're going to have a transparency map that's going to blend those things here perfectly. So you're not even going to see like any transition happening between those two pieces. In terms of topology, it's the simplest possible, right? It's very crappy like that. And I have like a double side, just to make sure the subsurface scattering is working properly. I don't like to have like this hollow in the back. I like to have as a solid surface, right? Like a watertight. And then that way I can actually have the subsurface scattering working correctly. It's pretty long like this because most of this is hidden within the cavity of the eye. So basically like a good chunk of this is going to be penetrating with the skin inside, and this is going to be probably like the area that's going to be visible. And this carancula here, you see, like normally what I do, I extend it even closer to the iris itself, so it goes pretty close to the iris. But if you look at your eye, it's not going to get that close, right? But the thing is, like, if you do that way, you can actually use a very nice blend, like a ramp map, that can blend like in a very, very soft way. And then this whole thing here is going to look like pretty much perfect when you look at the way it's blending in Maya, right? For the, let's look at the in Maya here, what I have for the carancula in terms of UVs. So the interesting thing about the carancula here for UVs is that because I'm using a ramp map, right? I could use like a vertical or a horizontal one, but in this case here, I'm using a vertical one. And you see, like, I try to keep my UVs pretty much straight, right? So the base of it, which is like this little area in there, that's right there in the bottom, right? And that's the tip in here, which is around there, right? It's around here. So if I add like a ramp map in here, I can actually blend between this area here and this area here and get a nice perfect blend happening right there. So if you look at this guys here, I can even hide some of them. I can show you. For example, let's see if I hide, let's try to hide, yeah, let's just hide the entire thing here so you can actually see the transparency, the way it works. Let's get this guy and this guy. See if I have any more lights in here. No. It's just render the carancula itself. Let's see, something like this. And right here, so let's see, I have this one saved. So you see, like, it's a perfect transition, right? Like it goes like transparent to basically like fades to nothing. And the trick here is to actually not use just like a transparency map for the color itself, is to make the object transparent as well. And what I mean by that is that if you make your object transparent, you're still gonna get the object to kind of like produce some shadows and stuff like that, right? But if you make the geometry transparent, it's basically like everything, including the specular and everything else, is gonna go completely transparent. And if you don't do that, you're still gonna get like you know, it's like specular and all this stuff. So if I make the transparency and also the object transparent, basically like everything blends very perfectly. You know, it's like including like the speck is gonna start picking up a little bit of the speck from the sclera itself, and then from the carancula, you know, and all this stuff here. I mean, like those colors, I can actually tweak them with ramps and get a little bit more redness in there, get more desaturated and everything, just by tweaking the colors here in Maya, right? So that's basically what I'm doing there. Let's see with the other objects in here. So let's bring back to this guy here and this guy here. Let's see, let's get all of those parts and the background, something like that. Let's see if we're gonna have to update the scene. No, it's okay. So here, if I switch to this area here, let's just look at the blending that's happening right here. Ouch. That's basically what I'm looking for, you know. I'm getting some of the veins that I painted very crappily in ZBrush, as you can tell in the carancula, but because they're gonna go kind of transparent in here, and because I'm also shifting the color more into a pinkish color in here, they're gonna, you know, like at the end they're gonna blend very nicely with the veins I have in the sclera. So take a look at this. This is a very important thing, you know, it's like to make sure that you have this transition that blends perfectly. It has to look like it's an appendix of that part, right? Like it's almost like part of the same structure. And having this double transparency in there was the best way I found to actually create this effect, you know. So let's look at this. So as you can tell, like this ugly transition that we had in here before, at the end, it doesn't quite matter, right? Because like I said, if I'm making the geometry transparent, that means that not even this edge is going to produce any shadow or anything. It's just going to completely disappear, like shadow, specular, everything. So it's going to be a perfect blend at the end, as we have in there, right? So it's kind of like this one merged perfectly with the next surface, and that's what I'm looking for. So let's look at how those shaders are all assembled now. Let's break down everything. And also we're gonna be talking as an optional thing that's like add that secondary surface, right? Like the secondary geometry I have for the water part inside of it, in case of like Jessica's eye. But as you can tell, like this eye here is the one I use the most, and it works very nicely. And I was like, the other one's gonna be kind of like an optional thing to you guys if you want to try. So let's break down this entire thing here. It's gonna take me a little bit because there are lots of things plugged. Let's start with the carancula. That's the simplest thing. Remembering that my my UVs, oh, in this case here, you know, it's like it's a different one, right? This is before I adjust it. So look at that. So let's get the one that has the adjusted version. This guy here. It's gonna be easier to look at this. So not this one. Did I adjust for Jessica? Yeah, I think Jessica's the one that actually I was nicer. So yeah, I think like it's gonna work because it's vertical enough. But if you want like a perfect transparency map that's gonna blend very perfectly, you want those lines to be more horizontal, like I have in here. Basically, like my blend is happening around this area, so that's why I kept every single one of them more horizontal, right? But you saw the render; it looks good. Even though it's not like a perfect transparency, right? Like it's a little bit there's a little bit of diagonal happening here, but yeah, let's so yeah, depending of the way that UV is gonna look like, as long as they are vertical, you should be fine. So let's work with this one here. That's the one we are working with right now, and leave Jessica's as the optional one, as I mentioned before. So let's hide everything but this eye here, which we know works. And then that's the UV, and let's look at the shader network. I go to graph. I have it selected, right? Selected, yep. So graph materials and selected object. And then that's basically the shader network right here. Let's make it bigger. So as you can tell, there's almost nothing, right? Like the shader network for the carancula is very simple. So I have like my go-to shader, which is basically like everything I start in Arnold is based on the AI standard surface. So basically, like, you're going to start with the AI standard surface, and then if you click on it, I'm going to expand it here. And let's look like at all the nodes in here. So starting from the top, the weight is at 1 here, right? But the weight at subsurface is also 1. So that means this is overriding my my diffuse map. So I can completely ignore this one if you're going to be using my shader network, because this one is just in case if you want to blend. As you remember, if I bring back this slider here to anything other than 1, it's going to start mixing with this diffuse channel, right? But in this case here, we're not going to be using it, so ignore that. For the specular, I'm using 1. And for the color, I don't think I'm using full white. Yeah, it's less than white. So it's like 0.916. So that's basically what I'm using there. And then for the roughness, it's very, very mirror-like. So it's a very mirror kind of surface. That's 0.010. And the index of refraction for this is 1360. This is going to be different for the other eye that I mentioned, like for Jessica's eye. And I'm going to show you why. Because of this. Let's see if I can get this guy here. You're talking about, like, you know, it's like there are different surfaces in there. We have like this extrusion that I mentioned, that's the cornea itself, right? And you're gonna have this watery kind of bubble right here in front of the eye, in the case of her eye, right? That has a different index of refraction. So my theory here when I was building this one as a simplified version of it was this. Let me get this guy with the refraction indexes. Let's see if that's the one. Nope, It's super low res, by the way. Let's see, there is one here that has the index of refraction. So tiny. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, right here. Oh, lost it again. So basically, like the corner itself has an index of refraction of 1.38, but the inside here, this bubble is 1.34, right? And then you get the lens that I mentioned before. But this one, again, only if you want to, create some kind of flashlight effect, like the, that crazy eye. Otherwise, I'm not going to be using it. So basically what I did to a simplified model is that I averaged those two here. So 134 and 138, I just did like 136 for the simplified model. And then for Jessica's eye, I actually followed this. So basically the bubble inside is 134, the corner itself is 138, right? In this case, here is the simplified version. So it's 136, right, for the index of refraction. And then if I go to transmission, I have the transmission here. So the map that I have plugged in transmission, which is like the transparency, right? Transmission equals transparency. So I'm gonna expand it, and I have a vertical ramp, and the vertical ramp is a very simple one, right? It's just like black and white, and this is gonna depend obviously on your model, right? So in my case here, that's basically like, it's starting around here, that black area, right? So if I go to here and go to transmission, so basically like that's basically what my map is doing in the context of the entire UDIM. So basically like the white is around here, so it's blending around here, and it's going to be dependent of your model. Obviously, if it was bigger in here, probably like I would have to move the white line a little bit further, and how much you're going to blend, like, and how far you're going to go with the blending as well. But as long as you understand this principle, that's just like, if I'm using like this model vertically, I have to use a vertical ramp in here, right? And this ramp here, it's just like a ramp from Maya. So it's like a Maya node. You can grab like a ramp node from here. Let's see. If you go to Maya, under textures, you can do like a 2D texture. There's a ramp in there. Basically, like you get the ramp and just use like black and white, and that's about it. Sometimes I remember like when I was converting a scene from an old version of Maya to a new version, Arnold was updated, and all of a sudden like my ramps from Maya didn't work for a little bit, and then they start working again. Another version, I don't know. But if something goes funky and your ramp map doesn't work, you can always use Arnold's ramp. So Arnold has one here. Let's see. I think it's utility. And there is a ramp in here somewhere. AI ramp float. So don't use the RGB, you can use the ramp float, and you can use this one in replacement for this one in case you have any problem, otherwise just use the Maya one. But yeah, this one definitely works. The Arnold one works. So that's the first thing. So that's the ramp we're going to be using for the transmission, right? Depending on your model, obviously, you're going to see, for example, you're going to go from here to here, or you're going to make just a tiny little transition. I would say go as far as possible, and that's why it's important to keep this edge here very straight in the bottom, because you can make a perfect transition, right? The way I have right now, I have to start the ramp a little bit more right here to be able to cover that, because that's a little wobbly in there, and because my my UVs are not completely straight, I have to actually compensate by eating a little bit more of that, right? Which is not a problem. So transmission, so basically like specular is done. Let's go to transmission, is done as well. Nothing else in there. Subsurface. So for the subsurface, what I'm using for coloring here, it's a little bit more of like a desaturated version of the skin I had before. And those are the values I have: 11.250, 0.667, and 0.442. This is for HSV, right? If I go to 0 to 1 RGB, so it's easier to see, it's 0442, 0202, and 0147. So you can see this in the recording later on. All right. So that's for the subsurface scattering radius. I'm using subsurface at 100%, so 1. And then for the color itself, we are using that crappy Maya map, right? It's looks like this, right? Straight from ZBrush, sorry, crappy ZBrush map. So that's like a visual reference, but you know, like I said, a lot of the stuff I actually healed a lot of this by tweaking my map right here. So the map went from this to something that rendered looks more like this. See, not a lot of veins visible or anything, because I'm tweaking the coloring here in Maya. So let's see the tweaks I'm doing here in case if you want to do something similar. Unless you want to really like nail the colors and everything in ZBrush, then even better, you know, you don't need to do all this stuff here. I normally use a lot of Maya to tweak my colors because if it's just like variations between characters, I can quickly do it in here instead of like painting new maps at every time, you know, it's just like a lazy version of it. So basically like I'm reducing the exposure. So from 0, I'm just reducing a little bit. So make it a little bit darker overall. And then I'm adding some offset in here. For the color gain, the default is full white, right? But instead of full white, I'm using 0.766. So I'm kind of removing some of that saturation of it, right? So kind of like bringing down, making it a little bit darker. And then for the darker tones, I'm actually offsetting them. So instead of like being completely black in here, which is the default, I'm actually offsetting this into a color that looks like this: 27,692, 0.064, and 0.104 for AGSV. In RGB, it would be 0.104 and 0.1 and 0.097. Just as a visual reference in there. So basically what I'm creating here is an offset that goes a little bit towards kind of like an orange ochre, something like that, but barely adding any color. It's almost completely gray, right? The saturation is only at 0.064. So it's a warm gray, let's say, a little bit of a warm gray. That's my offset. And then the effects should be all, you know, default. Everything else here should be default. So basically what I'm doing is just using those parameters in here: the exposure, the color gain, and the color offset, just like to tweak that and remove some of the super saturated veins and bring everything into something a little bit more blended together in pinkish, right? But again, it's going to be dependent on how you're painting your colors, because if they come here kind of like more pink than what I have, obviously you're going to have to compensate by, you know, offsetting some of this stuff even further, you know. And then let's see, for the scale, I'm using 0.115, which is a little bit below what I have for the skin itself. And this is just like me visually looking at it and then seeing like, okay, if I go further than this, then that's get very glowy, you know, I'm getting very glowy. So I'm probably gonna have to go a little bit smaller in terms of thickness than what I had for the skin overall, right? So it's basically like a visual thing. I look at stuff and I was like, what pleases me the most, I just go with it, you know. So instead of like 120 or 130, I'm using 115. Random walk through as well, and that does it for the subsurface. For the coat, so you saw like I have like the specular, and it's very thin, right? Like a 0.010, so it's like mirror-like. And then here I have even thinner, so like from 0.10, that basically like the specular becomes a secondary specular, and the coat becomes like the primary specular, which is even more mirrored than that. So I have like an effect that I have like something that's very tight and then a little bit more of a glowy speck around it, but not by much, right? It's just like to create like a double effect in there. And so for the coat, I'm using 0.526. If you want to add more like shininess to the eye, you know, like you see, like I don't like going like full on completely white in my reflections, right? It's always a little bit more muted. I think it looks more natural like that. Sometimes when you add like too much, you know, brightness to the eye, it looks fake. You know, it's like it's something you expect to see when you have a flashlight, for example. But the overall one is just like a window or something like that. You expect to see something more natural, you know. So I try to avoid going too crazy with the reflection, so I keep a little bit more muted, but very mirror-like. That's why I'm using this one. For the color, I'm using basically like plain white, 100%. And then the index of refraction, I'm using 1.5. And this one actually you can exaggerate to create like even more highlights if you want artificially, right? You can combine like the weight with the index of refraction if you want. And so that does it for the coat. And then the shin, I'm not using anything. And now for the geometry, that's the trick right here. You see, like I was using the transparency here in the transmission, right? I used that map, the ramp map. And then now if you scroll all the way down to the geometry, this one here, what's gonna do that's different from the transmission is that, like I said, if you make something transparent with transmission, you're still gonna get like the specular in there, you know, things still gonna happen. Even though it's transparent, it's gonna be like a glass, right? You get all the reflections and everything. But if you make the geometry transparent, then everything goes away, it completely disappears as a geometry itself, right? If you create a blend like that, that means that the shadow is gonna start disappearing and the speculars and everything else. So that's why I'm using it. So what I have plugged in here is a copy of that ramp. So it's just like a reverse version of it, basically. Let's see if I have color balance effects. Yeah, I'm using the reverse version here because like, I mean, like this is what we had before. I can use the invert in here to create like the transparent effect. So Maya has this thing, sometimes you have to invert things to be able to, you know, to see correctly. I guess like its legacy, there's a lot of stuff that was done in a certain way and then other plugins and stuff were developed and then all of a sudden you have to see what's working, you know. But in this case here, to get the transparency correct, so the transparent area became like the dark area, right? Opposite to what I had for the transmission in there. So that's the trick in there and that's all it is. So like that's basically the carunculus itself. That was everything explored about it. Let's switch to the sclera itself, which is one of the most important parts, right? Every part is important, but this one is very, very important. Again, I'm gonna go straight to the subsurface and I noticed that's already at 1 for the weight. So that means that the base we're gonna ignore. Doesn't matter what's plugged in here, is gonna be ignored anyway. I'm gonna go to specular. So the values I have for the specular for the sclera itself, 0.75. So, you know, not full on 100%. For the color itself of the specular, I'm actually cranking it quite a bit in here. Instead of like 1, I'm actually cranking it to 1.8. So you can do that in Maya, you know, sometimes you see a slider that goes to 1. You can actually put any number in there. So basically I'm exaggerating the color itself. I wonder why I did this. I could have I think exaggerate the weight. I think it's because I didn't want to play with the index of refraction and exaggerate and create some refraction I wasn't supposed to have. And I think instead of using that slider to crank it, I think I decided to preserve the refraction and just crank the color itself. I think that's what it is. So 1.8 in there, almost double. 0.20, so it's a little bit more broad than what we had for the carunculus. And then the index of refraction is like I said, is an average between the inner bubble in there of water and in the corner itself, right? So 1.360. I'm using a little bit of anisotropy here, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure why I added this one. I guess I noticed some difference back in the day, but I'm not sure. That's what I'm using, and it's working, you know. But I think it's just like to create some kind of like distortion in the specular itself, but I'm not completely sure. So specular done. Transmission. So for the transmission, we're going to have a different type of ramp mapping now. The ramp map we had before was a linear one, right? But if you remember, this one here, we have a circular kind of thing, right? Like it's pretty much centered right there in the UDIM. So if I look at the type of ramp map I'm using, it's a circular one. And in this case here, this is probably one that caused me trouble when I had like the circular from a Maya node. So I added a AI ramp float, which is the one I showed you guys before. right? Like if you go here to utility in Arnold, ramp float, this guy here, right? And then once it's plugged, then you can switch like between different things. You can have like vertical, horizontal, radial, circular, right? So in this case here, I'm using a circular one. And if you click this big button here, you can expand to see the curve itself, just like 3D Max, right? So that's basically my curve. I noticed that if I have like, you know, it's like a spline or a smooth, it doesn't give me a nicer result for some reason. So I kept it linear. So it's pretty much like, it's pretty harsh in there, the transparency. But when I was looking at the render, it seems like it was actually acting better than doing something like this, you know? So I kind of like kept everything linear. And then that's gonna depend on your model, how your UVs are set and everything. In my case here, basically like it's going from position 0.20 to position 0. Almost 30. So like it's a 0.10 difference in there. 0.0, yeah. So, but that's basically like based on my model, right? It's the kind of stuff like you're gonna have to have your model rendered. Let's do a little render here. You can see like visually how this is gonna change things. So for example, if I bring it around here, that's basically my blend right here. All right, let's keep it computing it. Oh, what happened? Did I change something? Oh, it's because I don't have my HDRI. Sorry, I was hiding everything before. Let's see which one is that now. Is that the one? Oh yeah, because I pressed the 6 button, so it's gonna start loading all those textures. Sorry about that. All right, okay. So let's try it again. Okay, that's better. Let's bring it to the side around here. I want to see that little area of transition right there, right? So if I start playing with this ramp here, let's see what's going to happen. So I had 0.2 and 0.3, right? So if I bring it here, looks eating a lot of it, and it's making the whole iris much smaller, so that the blend is actually becoming really, really big, right? So as I go more towards this, that's how you're going to have to test, you know, it's like have your render in there and then see what looks better for you. I can even go like sharper, right? So I get like a sharper edge in there. But I would say like it always looks more natural when you have like a nice blend, you know. So this is going to be dependent on your model and the UVs, obviously. But that's how I have it set. So let's cancel this one, minimize this. So basically, let's go back to this guy and see where we are at. So we talked about the transmission. So basically, that's what it is, right? AI ramp float. And then let's see if there's anything else I did in this map here. No, that's all it is. This is a very simple node. And then everything else is default. So the color is at 1, so it's completely white. And that's about it. So transmission. Subsurface scattering, all the way cranked to 1. And the scale I have a little bit thicker than what I would have for the skin, right? If I had like 120 up to 130, this is basically the scale I'm using for the sclera itself. I also random walk, and there's a little bit of a front scattering happening here. Again, like probably like my you know, my judgment when I was actually looking at the renders, I probably decided to crank a little bit the front scatter for some reason. But it's based on feel, you know, it's like it's not based on actually anything scientific. So for the subsurface color, this one is going to have a bunch of things plugged into it. So let's take a look. Actually, not this one. I think what's going to have more stuff is the iris one. It's going to click the subsurface color. And then let's see what we have plugged in here. So I have the corner itself, which is like the map that came straight from ZBrush, right? This map right there. And then I have sRGB. Let's see for the color, the exposure is default. The color gain, I'm actually switching things around here a little bit. So let's see what I have plugged. So instead of like having that map to look exactly what I have in ZBrush. That looks a little bit too saturated, right? What I normally do is actually I tweak those sliders and plug different things in here, so I can actually it's like reduce the effect that was being caused by that super saturated stuff by countering with something else. So for the color offset, I'm keeping like default. So like color offset based like this, that, like, any color you add here, is gonna increase the offset, right? But I'm not using anything. So that's set black in there. But for the color gain itself, I have a ramp here, and as a circular map, it is another AI ramp RGB from Arnold. So let's see what this is doing. For example, if I have here, let's see if it's going to affect that at all. No, it's not even going to show in the viewport, I think. Yeah, it's not going to show in the viewport. Let's go back around here. Oops. Go back. Surface color, then this guy here. Yeah, so basically what I'm doing, let's see if this is a ramp RGB, and I'm starting from this area here, and it's actually a circular one. So that means I'm making a little bit darker right in the middle. So basically, like, I'm making darker in the middle for some reason. I'm not sure why, but yeah, I'm making darker maybe to create more of an effect in the lens itself. I'm not sure, but I'm showing everything that's plugged in here. It's the kind of stuff I'm gonna have to test. Maybe I don't even need this ramp in here, but it's definitely plugged. So yeah, this is the color gain that I have in there. And then other than that, let's see if I have anything else in here. Color offset, I don't have anything. Effects, none. And that's about it. So that's for the subsurface. Oh, and then I have the radius, sorry. So the radius, instead of, I think one of my kids is crying. My wife is on it. It's so hard to tell. Sometimes I think it's one of our kids is actually coyotes outside. We live by a hill, and there's like every time I think they catch something, there is this family celebration. Then the coyotes go crazy, man. And it's like, it sounds like something from the movies, and it's right here outside of our window. It's very interesting. And by the way, it's 10:37. You guys have any questions so far? I know, like, I'm trying to cover all this stuff, and that's why I kind of keep talking nonstop. I'm definitely hearing some talk.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
I have two questions that you don't need to tackle now. The first one was just when you showed the speed, the time lapse of the sculpting of the iris.
The iris,
Just how do you do the array painting?
Oh, the array painting. Yeah, it's like in ZBrush, if I do it here. So if you go to your transform stuff, so for example, like if I have my X turned on, right? Mm-hmm. Which is like to create my symmetry. You just have to click this R here for radial symmetry. Perfect. And then you can actually put like 30 in there. And then you can sculpt a bunch of things at the same time.
All right, awesome.
So for example, like, it's like if I do this, like I create that little crazy. Yeah, that kind of saves some time just to block stuff,
Okay, that was it. And the other thing is just at some point, if we could look at eye references for blind people. Oh yeah, that's a cool one. I think like the fascinating ones are the cataract ones, right? Like the kind of whitish. Those are very cool. So I don't know if towards the end of the class, once you're done with my, if we could just look at some of those and just how would you tackle that? Yeah, I was thinking about that because like I was thinking about making one of the eyes of my guy have like a cataract. How you say cataract? Cataract, yeah. Yeah, cataract. So I was thinking about using Jessica's model for the eye because since that one has a bubble inside, there is a way you can actually make the refraction to look milky. There's a way to make it milky,
There's something about the subsurface in there. So you can actually make a transparency that's milky. And I think if you have that little bubble in there, it's going to work perfect for that purpose. I can do some, tests on my own because I want to do that for my model. And then I can show you what I find.
Okay, yeah, because I want to make my character blind. Like
Cool.
So yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. Let's explore that. Like anything that's different, I was like, I appreciate that. Alrighty. So let's go back here to where we stopped. We stopped at the radius, right? So the radius for the sclera. So I have my color map plugged in there, and then for this exposure, again, like this is all tweaks that I do just to color correct stuff within Maya. Oh, and by the way, yesterday someone mentioned on my Instagram. Let's see if I can find it here. Remember I mentioned something about color correcting the albedo in ZBrush. That was a new feature or something like that I thought I saw. So someone posted here. Let's see. I think, let's see. Oh, this guy posted, you might be looking forward to the polypaint color shift sliders showing at the ZBrush Summit. That's exactly what it was. Looked like it's going to be super handy for color corrections. Yeah, it seems like the way it works, you basically like you can use those sliders and it shifts the entire painting that you have in your model. So for example, like if it's missing orange, right? And you want to bring it more towards orange, you just like color correct the entire poly paint at once, and it basically like it's done. So that's what I thought I saw. I think it's coming in the next version of ZBrush. I cannot wait for that one because a lot of those adjustments I'm doing right here, I can definitely do in ZBrush and have the color come straight from ZBrush already corrected for me. All the stuff I do here, all those color corrections, it's the kind of stuff I'm showing you guys what fits for my own color, but doesn't necessarily something that you're gonna have in your model because maybe you're gonna be painting a better color map, right? But at least I'm showing how I use them and how I manipulate the color in here so you have an idea about how to do if you need to do it. So in this case here, I'm just like cranking the exposure a tiny little bit. So from 0 to 0.01. So making a little bit brighter than overall color that I brought from ZBrush. But other than that is the color that comes from ZBrush. This is for the radius, right? I'm not talking about the color itself. The color itself, you already went through that. You saw that I changed, other stuff in there, like the color gain, things like that. But that was for the radius. So scale was 0.5, random walk 2, and then 0.1 for anisotropy. And that's it. For the coat, I'm not using any coat for this one. So I'm not like having like a double specular, but I think I should actually. I think I'm gonna experiment with that. If I'm gonna go like with the second spec by using coat, it's almost like I have to compensate. So if I have my specular cranked all the way to 0.750, I might actually have to bring it down a little bit and then introduce some coat with a different roughness, right? So I can use this one as the main spec, for example, like a 0.01, right? And this one be double. And then I just gonna have to balance out like the weight between the two to have like an effect that looks correct. But at this point, I'm not using it. So if we're going for results, we know it works the way it is for my model, and I'm not using code for it, which is kind of peculiar, right? Like I use code for the carancula. But the thing is, like I keep experimenting with stuff, it's like a lot of stuff, I see the result and then I have planned to actually incorporate in the other model, and then all of a sudden I run out of time because, you just have a month to finish the entire thing. And then ended up like never finishing those models. But it basically like you're catching up like all my steps on how I approach those things. And then eventually when I finish it up, you're gonna have things more settled for the next classes, I guess. But Shin, nothing plugged in there. Emission, nothing. And then geometry, I'm not gonna have anything either. Because remember, I'm just making the transparent geometry just for the carancula itself, right? Because of the blending. But this area here, we need the reflections in the front, so we cannot use like, geometry opacity in here, because that would destroy the specular as well. So you keep that untouched. So that covers the sclera itself. And then let's go to those guys now. it's using a little bit of a bumping here as well. It's probably and I have a little lens in there, but it's completely black. So if I look at the base, let's see. So it's like weight black, black, black. Specular is probably 0. Yep. So I'm just using that one as to create a little void. So instead of like using the hole itself, right, which should be painted black anyway from ZBrush, I'm just actually blocking it with a little void in there. And because it's a lens, I can actually eventually do, you know, it's like add a little bit of reflection if I want to, create like a red eye or something, you know, red eye effect. But so let's see, this one, so is basically like just a little void that I have. So no mystery in there, just basically like make everything like no specular, no color, no nothing, and it should be fine. And then for this guy here, that's gonna be an important one. Let's look at the subsurface. So again, I'm using full-on subsurface. Sometimes I'd rather use a little bit less subsurface and then have it mixed with the base. But in this case here, seems like I'm using like full-on subsurface, and we know it's working. So let's see if we can render, just so we can see how this looks like without it. It's not gonna look very impressive because it's just, you know, it's just color, right? And displacement. There's nothing super fancy about it. So it looks like this, you know. There's a little bit of a ramp in there, so I'm kind of like making it a little bit brownish in the middle, a little slightly reddish, and a little bit more, going more like to the brown greenish side of things around here, and then back to brown around there. So it's just like a very simple ramp, right? It looks more impressive when you have like the specular on top and all that stuff, right? But the model itself is not, you know, that much complex. I think I would benefit if I actually added more interesting textures around those things, you know. But like I said, I mean, like sometimes you look at those in the reference, you know, and they are quite simple in terms of color, right? It's mostly detail, but the color itself, like at least for the brown ones, they're super simple, right? Look at that, like it's completely, almost completely plain, right? It's a little greenish and yellowish in there. Some of that's coming from the subsurface scattering as well. Now, if you're painting something like this, then you're kind of screwed, right? Because you have all those little, look at this one. Looks like there's almost like a vein in there. Look at that thing, man, like a reddish vein going inside of it. That's so bizarre. Definitely an alien. We just spotted an alien. It's amazing. It's pretty incredible. Okay, so let's look at the rest of the stuff. So base, not using it in this case. For the specular, I'm using a broad spec. So instead of like something super shiny, right, like the eye, I'm using like 0.2. The weight is a little, 0.6. And the color I'm using is this one here. So it's kind of like a beige kind of thing. So instead of like going full on white, right, it's kind of like it has the specular matching a little bit closer to the color of the texture itself. So those are the values I'm using: 0.2769, 0.468, and 0.504. For RGB 0 to 1, 0.504, 0.350, and 0.268, right? So let's go back in here. And then, so roughness is done. Index of refraction, 1.550. And then again, you're gonna be looking at their renders and seeing what makes sense, right? And especially like if I'm doing renders with an environment like this one, that's kind of diffuse environment, I have to make sure that I also do some renders with just with a single small light source, so I can see how specky this is gonna go. And I think for me, ideally, is something that's not specky at all, right? Like it's this very broad spec just to reveal the forms, but not enough spec that's gonna look like shiny in any way. You know, it's like the shininess has to come from the water outside of it, right? Remember when you have something like underwater, you don't see a lot of reflection, right? Like when it's underwater, it's kind of like, you know, it's like that's a very hard one to nail when they're doing like look there for underwater stuff. It's like most of the stuff has no reflection. It's mostly just like a caustic effects and stuff. So yeah, that's why I keep kind of bland, right? So specular done, transmission. no transmission because there's no transparency in this object. So done. Subsurface at 1, and then the scale of the subsurface is very tiny. And why is it very tiny, right? Like why it's tinier than everything else? It's because if I look at this, those little macro structures in here, if I have a very broad subsurface scattering, those little guys gonna go completely glowy. Everything's gonna be like a, you know, like a JLo. So that's why I visually I tweaked until I got to a value that looked like almost no subsurface, but just enough to get some subsurface around those very thin surfaces, right? So that's why I kind of like brought it down all the way to 0.20, which is like much smaller than like 130 for the skin, right? And then random walk at is version 2. That's the latest one I'm using. And then let's look at the color. The color itself is going to be a mess in here because, like I said, the color I'm using is this crazy map here that says nothing, right? Just like that map that came straight from ZBrush. So the only thing here, the only clue is that it's darker outside of the iris area, a little lighter in here. And I use a cavity selection. So it's like select by cavity. And I use that just to add some variation in there, some greens and oranges and stuff. But as you can tell, it's very crappy because my plan is to always like overwrite this one in Maya at the end. So that's basically what I'm doing here. To override that, I'm actually cranking the exposure quite a lot in this case. It's always going to depend on the model we're going to be working on, right? If I have a model, an eye like this, right? It has plenty of like oranges and browns in there. Then in that case, I'm going to have to go lighter than what I had in my ZBrush, right? That's why I'm cranking it. But if it's a very dark eye, then obviously I'm going to have to keep it more like a lower exposure in here. So basically like, what I'm doing is just like cranking that exposure altogether, right, to something larger. For the color gain, let's see what I'm doing here. So I'm using a crazy ramp map. So it's again, like it's Arnold ramp, RGB. Remember, like when I was doing the transparency ramp for the transparency of the cornea, I was actually using a ramp float, right? The float is when you use using like black and white, and you want like a nice transition, right? So you're gonna use the float one. But for everything else that uses color, you're gonna use the RGB one. And when you have the RGB one, you have access to any color you wanna pick. So remember that by default, this color gain in here is white, right? So basically, like by default, anytime you plug any textures to Maya, you're gonna get the color gain set automatically to white. That means like it's fully, you know, it's like it's getting the entire range of colors of that map. If you bring closer and closer to black, it's gonna remove more and more of the color until it becomes completely black, right? So that means you can offset stuff here by switching instead of like white in certain areas. So if this is like white around here, I actually switched to slightly gray. And then here I added a tint of green, and it has to be very desaturated, right? Like all those colors, they cannot scream at you. Otherwise, they're gonna look completely red and super green, you know, when you render. So they are very faint. For example, as an example here, you can try actually to tweak it in real time here. So you see like I had this nice transition. You can barely see the blends in there. But look what happened if I saturate this green just slightly. Let's see this guy here. Let's just like saturate it more. So you start getting like that band that's very, very green right there, right? And then if I saturate this one more, so it gets very, very red in there. So you have to actually be very careful and make sure that you don't saturate too much. If you're trying to just use them as offsets, of course. But if you're using like for full color, then you feel free to do whatever you want to do. But in this case here, I use like very, very minor tweaks, right? Even this guy here, for example, this is probably right in between. It's probably around that area. So if I add any color in here, see what it did there, like just like adds that little band in there. And yeah, so let's get back to this and close this one up. So that one is plugged for my color gain, right? But then remember, I have the color offset as well, right? So if I want to offset like the darker tones, by default, Maya uses color gain at white and then color offset at black, right? But if I bring this one lighter and lighter, all the dark tones is going to start getting lighter and lighter as well. So I have some other stuff plugged in here. And in this case, here's a very, very subtle map. So I have a ramp RGB in here. And I think I'm shifting from, I think this one could be like even a float version, because I think it's like, it doesn't have any color. Let's see if I have any color. No, the saturation is a little bit on the, oh, but it's black. So this one could be full black. And let's see which one is this one. Oh, this map is just as a placeholder, I guess, because I think I had something to tweak stuff around. But at this point here, you can ignore this one because both colors are full black. So in this case here, even if I didn't have this map here, it would work just fine. I think I kept in there because as an option, if I'm going to do like some different eye color, I can actually use the offset. So for example, like if you're rendering there, let's see what happens if I tweak one of them. Let's get this guy here and shift it. So you see like I add like some whitish right in the middle. In the same way, I can add a color in here. So for example, say add something like more bluish, right? I think it was just a placeholder for, if I needed to do something with it. And then this one here, let's see what's doing. This one is the outside. So the outside, I can, put the green in here so you can see it, right? So that's just like, yeah, definitely a placeholder, but you can either use it in there and save for later or not have it all if you want to keep things simple for yourself. And then alpha gain, nothing. And that's about it for the subsurface color. So actually the subsurface color, we already saw that was basically like this, this other ramping here, right? So that one was actually the subsurface radius. So that's the one we just checked. Actually, it's the same one. Yeah, I think I have a copy of it plugged for both channels. We can easily check this around here. Let's get this model and then graph, get this one. Yeah, basically like what I have here is the iris and the output color is plugging in both the color and the radius. So, like it's basically like the same map that's plugged in both. So yeah, so basically like whatever I have plugged in here, it's plugged in the radius. So if we went through all this stuff here, that's basically the same values for the second one. Scale 0.20, like I said, random walk. And then let's see if we have any code. Code I have a little bit. So this one adds a very, very broad spec. Remember that a mirror-like spec would be like 0.001. So I have 0.7. So that's like a very, very broad spec. And it's slightly orange in color. Those are the values in there. And then a weight is 150. So it's not like a super high spec. It's just a little spec with lots of roughness to it, right? Just create like a little bit of more of a broad spec overall that creates this kind of dull kind of surface, right? And also the dullness of it is coming from the bump that I'm using. I believe I have a bump map applied, so we're gonna get to it. For the index of refraction, 1.5. That's about it. Quote. Shin, nothing. Emission, nothing. No, blah, blah, blah. Geometry, yep. So for the geometry, we don't have any opacity plugged in there because it's not transparent, but we have a bump map. So let's see what that bump map is. It's actually a noise. And let's see what type noise that is. I think it's like a regular Maya noise. Yeah, it's the regular Maya noise, which you can look around here. It's so funny because this was like from Dick Smith model, right? And now I have those names Dick Clean, which is very suggestive. I have a clean dick in there. That's so weird. It wasn't on purpose, I swear. But when I saw it first time, I was like, oh, I'm gonna leave it. It's fine. But my kids are not allowed in the room when I'm working on those shaders. So let's look at what I'm using here is basically like the Maya. And if you look at the 2D surfaces, you have the fractal, right? And you have the noise. So if you click the noise, you're gonna get like a similar, set of parameters in there. Let's see like this one here, I'm using the Perlin noise. So like this is the one I'm using, right? So if I click this one, if I switch to Perlin noise, so that ignores that part in there. And then basically my parameters are gonna have to copy in there for the noise, if you wanna copy, obviously, or if you wanna do your own noise in there. But those are the parameters I have. So I'm gonna just leave in there for a little bit so you can actually freeze when you're watching the video. So yeah, so those are just like some parameters for the frequency and everything. So I get this tiny little micro bump like that, right? Not micro bump, it has quite a bit of a bump. But, and then for the intensity, let's see what I have for intensity. Like basically like that's the bump value that's plugged. And I have my bump depth cranked all the way to 0.3, which is quite big actually for a bump. But the render is actually look okay. So it looks like this. So you get the bump just like strong enough to break up the, it's like any specular or anything like that. So it kind of like, overrides a lot of stuff. It becomes very rough surface. And that's what I'm looking for. So, and then that does it for the bump. And other than that, I think we covered everything concerning the eye. So we went through those 3 pieces, and then the last piece that's missing is this guy here. Where is it? This guy. So you see, like, it's not even conforming to the surface in there. This is basically the tear line, right? And the way I work with the tear line, it's a very, very simple geometry. I try to keep it like very low res. You see, like in the past, I even had like this thing going up in here because my intention was to actually cover all the way up. And ideally, and this is something I still have to do for all my models, is to actually have this both like in the bottom and going all the way around and the top as well, because that's what happens in the real world, right? Like you have like this tear line that goes all the way around, including the top eyelid, right? But because we barely see that, because there's always a shadow in there, unless you're looking like from below like this, you're not gonna see the top one. I normally keep just the bottom one, right? And it adds this little nice effect. You see it right there, right? But when you have like everything combined with the eyes, it's like in the, it's like in the renders themselves, it looks very nice. It's like it really breaks up that dull line and looks much nicer when you have the little wet spot in there. So the way this one is set, like I said, I could just remove those faces in here altogether at this point, right? And just keep this little simple geometry there, because those lines are actually intersecting with the correct line anyway, so it's not going to change anything. In terms of geometry, if I turn off my subdivision, so I'm going to press 1, see what it is like it's a perfect 90-degree transition, right? So this is basically like, it's always like a kind of like a placehold until I'm happy with the position of the eye. So the way I try to work with this is, like I said, like I keep everything very low res first, so it's easy for me to manipulate and bring stuff and, it's like, and move stuff around, for example, like that, right? But then the other thing I do, when I am happy with the positioning and everything, I make some of those objects live. So the way it works is like this. For example, like if you want to use this outer object here as a reference, right? You can just click, and you can just click this little guy here, this little magnet, make the selected object live, right? And before I do this, you can even do this. Click the little layer. Where are my layers here, by the way? Right here. Okay, so I'm gonna just click my layer, and then I'm gonna click this little guy here, the last one, create a new layer and assign the selected objects, right? So that means that now if I turn it on and off, and turn off my object in there, I can just name it, like double click and put like sclera. I can put any color I want in there. So now I have it assigned to a layer, and I can just click this little magnet, and now it's live, right? So that means if I have to snap stuff to the surface now, for example, if I move a vertex, all is going to snap back to that surface, right? But then I can actually hide this, and it's still going to conform to it. So I can just like have it invisible in there, and I can use just to guide me. And then every time I move this around, it's going to snap back to that eye surface, right? So that way you can actually create a pretty perfect surface in there. Obviously, I'm using a very low resolution here. So you might want to try maybe a little bit more resolution if you want. But I tell you, it's very overkill. You know, it's like just like if you just position it correctly in there, even if you have little gaps and stuff, you're rarely going to be able to see it, you know. So I kind of like, I just keep it the way it is. So now I can use like this for both things. For example, like once I have the skin, so the eyelid's visible in here, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pick and choose. For example, I can either use like this middle line and snap back to the eyeball, just like I'm doing right now, right? And you keep like the eyeball as being the one driving this snap to surface. Or I can actually make sure that I have the eyelids completely visible. And then when I do this, I want to make sure that I'm hitting right the transition between the eyelid and the eyeball. That way would be pretty perfect, right? If you do that way. And then basically like this third line in here, so those two I'm snapping to the eyeball itself, right? And then, so this third line here is the one that I would need the eyelids visible. So what I would do, I would just like unhide this one, click this little magnet again, right? So now I'm out of that mode, right? So it's not magnet anymore. And then I would basically like click the other model, which would be like the skin itself with the eyelids, and then click that one again. I can even assign to a layer just like I did before, right? And then once that is all set, then I can have this guy here snapping to the eyelids, right? So this one I would basically like, if I had it in there, I would be sliding straight to the eyelids themselves. You see that there's a change right here is because we have that little bulge, right? Like, so right in this area here is going to have a change of direction in there slightly. So in that area, maybe it would be better if we had like more resolution for this geometry I'm working on, so it could conform to that bulge more correctly, you know. But like I said, it's definitely overkill. You're barely going to see any issues with this, you know. It really is going to help just to add this hints of light in there. So at the end of the day, you're going to have like a very simple geometry like this. It's going to look like a 90-degree thing, right? But once you have subdivided, it's going to create this perfect curvature in there, right? That's going to go all the way around. Now let's talk about the shader and also the UVs I have for it. So here's a couple of tricks. Let's go modeling UV. So for this guy here, you see like I wasn't very careful with it. I just made sure that I had it completely unfolded. But if I show you this one here, let's see if I get the one, let's see, display, show all. There's one of them, I think was, again, like the one from my wife, I believe, that I actually was more careful with it. Which one is that? No, I didn't. I thought I had one that I made completely square and straight. There are a couple of tools you can actually use in Maya for that. But yeah, it seems like they're all sharing the same UV, so never mind. As long as they are very much unfolded, so let's just select this one, Control U. Yeah, seems like it wasn't completely unfolded, but this one should work better now. That's more unfolded, I guess. So I have it using a good chunk of the UDIM. You can even like go a little bigger, but that's going to affect the size of my bump. So I don't know if I should, but I made it a little bigger in there. And then let's look what the shaders are right now. Yeah, this class is going to be basically like a gigantic reference for eye shading and modeling for you guys. So I'm not going to be doing much of painting or sculpting, but definitely like focuses on the shaders themselves. I think that's the most important part for you. And based on what I'm seeing, like in terms of the progress of my students, you know, it's like the ones who actually start doing those offline classes before we even started the live ones. I think what I'm explaining is pretty clear, because I've seen the results straight away and didn't even have to ask me anything. So I'm proud of you guys doing that. So let's look at this. Oh, I hate that. Okay, so let's look at the shader itself. So for the tier line, base, nothing, right? Because it's completely transparent. So even the base here completely disappears. There's no weight for it. Specular, I have 0.76. Color, it's white. And then roughness, 0.040. Index of refraction, I have 1.6 in here. It's a little bit like a, you know, more than you normally expect. For example, like you would expect maybe like 1.360 again, or 1.4 or something. But I'm using a 1.6 in here. I think, again, like visually, with the skin and everything, when I was looking at it, I thought it looked more natural with that index of refraction. But like everything I do, it's completely open for experimentation, you know. This is gonna give you a nice ballpark. Everything I'm saying is like, it's a gigantic ballpark. It's the kind of stuff like you're gonna get results straight away instead of having to scramble for tests. But it has room for you to play with those values and obviously have like a render view on your side and then test it, and so you can see visually what's doing. For the transmission is full on transparent, so there's no map assigned or anything, right? So nothing fancy there, just fully transparent, color white. Subsurface, there's no need for it because it's transparent, so there's nothing there. The code, I'm not using a secondary spec. I could, just like with the sclera, I could apply one, but I would have to balance with the actual specular, like, or like reduce a little bit the specular and include a little bit of code with a different roughness. Right, so nothing to see here. And then shin, nothing. Emission, nothing. No. And this one here, this one is the trick. So you can either use a displacement map for it, or you can use like a noise, right, to create the little waviness to it. So if I click this one, that's basically my parameters. Again, it's a noise straight from Maya. Again, it's a Perlin noise, right? So if you switch this one to Billow, you're gonna get more, you know, different parameters available. But the Perlin noise keeps everything just in this top part. It's very simple to set up. So that's basically my settings in there, like a visual reference for you. And then, let's see. Let's go back here. Just leave a little bit more so you can pause later on. So here, for the bump depth, I'm basically using like a minus 0.90. You can use positive or negative. Visually, the result was more interesting, negative. And that's about it for the shader and everything. So if you render this one now, let's look in how it looks like with an actual render. Click this one. Turn this one off. So that's basically what the noise is doing. You see, like the reflection is a little bit distorted, right? But not too crazy. There's some distortion there. If you add like too much waviness, it looks completely fake, you know. But then let's see if you get something like, let's see this one here. Let's see if I go back to the main one. Yeah, you see, like once you have the skin, right? Like the skin around it and everything, you see like the amount you're gonna see of that, it's so little. So just like little glimpses of the specular in there, but almost nothing, right? Like it's just to get the little hints of it. So you look like it's wet in there, but it's not like overwhelming or anything. And obviously like the type of spec you're gonna be using is gonna affect that as well, right? So it's a little bit more broad, you're gonna get one effect, and if it's a little bit tighter, you're gonna get a different effect. But you see like it looks fake in here and kind of watery. It's because we don't have anything behind it. So once you have the skin in there, it's gonna look pretty good, you know. Now, the trick I was talking about is this. I experimented with this in the past, and for some reason I removed it. But what you can do in here, it's if you make this UVs completely, let's get back to this. If you make the UVs completely square, right? And by that, I mean, like if you do something like, there's even a tool in here. Let me see if I remember. There is a tool that actually squares things out. Where is it? I remember using it, but I don't remember where it is. But there is a tool here you definitely can
Straighten things up.
Yeah, it's a modify, and then
if you go to tools and then you go to the UV toolkit.
Oh, it's already here. It's already here. Let me get it here. Yeah. But there is one that definitely a line. Is it a line and snap? I don't remember. I thought it was under the modify actually. Oh, here it's straighten border, right? It's straighten shell. Let's see what this one does. That didn't do it, but it's one of those. Let's see if I can get the preserve. No, I don't remember. It was one of those, man, and he actually does a very good job straightening things up. But if you can't, you can always do this like manually, obviously, depending on the tool you're going to be using there. But I could potentially like just force it to, you know, to square like this, and go to the next one and do the same. Could potentially do like that. But there's definitely a tool in there I already used. Just don't want to waste time. So something like this, and then the middle one, I would do the same. Something like that. And then if you have something that looks a little bit like this, a little bit more straight like that. So what you can do here, you can actually use a trick, which is that ramp map that I created before. Remember the ramp map I used for the geometry itself, not for the transmission, but the geometry itself? That ramp map you can potentially use like starting with the black and then going white around here and then black again at the end. And if you do that way, for example, you can even go crazy with this guy here and use the entire UV to do that. But yeah, not the entire UV because the bump map is going to be affected. But yeah, you're probably going to have it somewhere. Maybe you can use it at the top as a reference, and you can just create the ramp from that point. So you can create like black, white, and black again. And that way, if you're making the transparency of the geometry work, that means that this kind of effect in here, you see like there's a little border that's still visible around here. You can totally eliminate that border and make it a perfect transition for both like the bottom part, like that merges with the eyelid, and this top part here that merges with the sclera and the iris itself. So you can always use that trick, but I'm gonna leave it to you guys to experiment. You know, it's like I said, when you see the renders, you can barely see any artifacts. You're mostly gonna see just a little, you know, glimpses of little highlights and stuff. But if you want to make perfect, you can definitely use a ramp in the geometry tab. You know, that's a little trick you can try to experiment with.
Yeah, it's the straighten UVs.
It is, right? It's just
it's not the straighten shell. It's the straighten UVs.
Oh, it's straighten UV. Let's see. Yeah, it's one of those for sure. Let's see right here. So if I had that one.
You want to modify and then straighten UVs.
Oh, there you go.
Below, yeah.
And then you have those parameters, right? The angle and stuff. So yeah, like I got like the bottom part is straight now. Let's see, 30. Yeah, that's it. So 50. There is a point that's kind of like it messes up the entire thing. I remember that. But that gives you a nice help for sure. 55. Oh, that blew up. And I guess I can use just like one direction or the other one. Let's see what this one V does. That didn't do much. So I guess you're gonna have to have a little bit of a ballpark. So if I make like close enough, even if I have something like this, I think it should be able to compute it. Let's see, UV. Oh, sorry, still using the very high number, 50. Oh, weird. Thought it was working before. 40. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so that's pretty good. And then this ones here, you can actually, you know, I think you can do automatic too, but if you can't, then you can do just like manually if you want to. Yeah, very cool tool. Let's see. Yeah, this one is actually not doing anything there. So 60. Huh, interesting. Yeah, it's not doing the other direction, but it's definitely making it square, at least like the borders are square. Yeah, so that's basically what I had for you guys. Like, you have any questions about all this stuff? I know it's a lot of stuff, and it's definitely like the kind of video you're gonna have to watch with your project on the side and then pause to get all those parameters and stuff. But if you have any questions about anything at all here, just let me know. We have like 10 minutes, so it's a good time for it.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I have a question about rendering. I started trying a bit, and I thought I had a pretty good computer, but it's going really slowly, like 1 minute per render, and I didn't even increase the samples yet.
1 minute per render?
Yeah, and it's like lower resolution, 1K square.
1 minute per render, you think it's slow?
Well, I'm usually working on games. So,
oh, there you go.
That's where rendering pipelines. And
yeah.
usually GPU in when I'm using Blender and stuff like that. So I'm not that good with rendering.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna tell you that Arnold has amazing quality in the final output, but unfortunately it's all CPU, right? Like, it's not like, my renders take a long time. I mean, like those final renders I have, it takes like, I would say like 45 minutes one screenshot. But those ones just for tests and stuff, like those ones I post on Instagram, like the one I posted today, it probably takes about like 10 minutes of render in 900 by 900. But it's definitely like, if you're at 1 minute, it's pretty good, man.
No, I'm not even talking about the final render. I know that those usually take a long time. It's just while you're working and trying to test and tweak parameters, it takes pretty long time to update.
Yeah, so what's the camera anti-alias you're using right now?
Sorry?
The anti-alias you're using right now, like your AA samples?
Just the default ones. I didn't increase them yet. I think in your video you bumped them up a bit.
Yeah,
so I think if a render still a bit more rough than you get.
Okay, yeah, you're gonna get a lot of noise, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so for me, like for this type of render, I just had up. So this is basically like 6 samples right now, which is like, it's okay for the most part, like for doing tests. But if you get close, you're definitely gonna start seeing noise. So and normally when I do something a little bit more refined, I crank this to 8, and I normally keep those ones at 3. So basically, like the way it works, it kind of like it multiplies by those other values. So this is the main anti-alias, and it's gonna subdivide. For example, like 8, I believe it turns into 18 samples in here, and then another 18. You know, so if I reduce this to 2, you're gonna see that number changing in there. So for example, like if I had 1368, if I crank to 3, this all of a sudden is like 1548. So you can always play with those, you know, but then you're gonna get more and more noise, and then that's the multiplier in there, right? But I would say like 6 for me would be like the minimum I would use. Otherwise, like the noise is so big that it ends up like mixing up with what you're seeing in terms of specular. And sometimes, for example, if you're using like some roughness in your spec, right? So you want like a spec that's very thin and some second pass that's kind of like a broad spec. If you don't have enough samples, everything looks like you get all those tiny little specks everywhere, and you look like, oh, that's kind of like the effect that I'm looking for because I want that. But then as soon as you want to do like like the final renders and you crank your anti-alias, all of a sudden it looks very plasticky, and all the you know, it's like the thing that you thought was kind of like sparkly and everything, it's basically like it was supposed to be very plasticky because you don't have enough samples. It kind of, you know, looks like something that is specky, you know, it's like sparkly. So yeah, I have to be careful with that. That's why I try to keep like my anti-alias like at 6 at minimum, just to eliminate some of the major noise. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like when you're working with games, right, and Blender and GPU, you're getting like instant results for a lot of stuff, and then when you're back to like CPU render, it's kind of like it's a different world. I mean, like the final result's gonna look really nice, but it definitely takes time to process, you know, unfortunately. But hopefully Arnold's is on its way to get the GPU working decently. But at this point, there's no comparison to V-Ray, for example. V-Ray is like very mature, and they are doing like C-Graph, like with the GPU stuff, like for many years now. And then Arnold just came up with it, and it's still in beta. They have it available here, but it's so buggy. I tried to do anything with it, and it runs out of memory super easily. It's just basically right here, right? GPU beta right there.
Yeah, I tried it a bit, but it crashed in a very simple
yeah. It doesn't work for me either. I mean, like, I don't even know why they have that available, you know, because they say like, oh, we keep in there just as a test. That's why they made sure to put beta in there, because they want to collect like, you know, feedback from people so they can actually improve it. But I don't think it's at that stage yet, you know. It's like, I think this is pretty much alpha, because, you know, how can you give feedback if the thing doesn't work at all? I mean, like, I have like simple scenes I try to render with it sometimes, and it runs out of memory. And then sometimes it's able to load everything in memory, but then the render is extremely slow. It's slower than my CPU for some reason. And my graphics card, I was looking at their list of compatible stuff. It's actually the GTX 1070 here, and it has like 6 gigs and actually 8 gigs of RAM. And it was supposed to be a good card to start, you know. It's like, and still, you know, it's crap. It doesn't work. But that's Maya, you know. It's like I would be talking better about Maya if they actually if they were actually helping our school, but they are not. I sent them an email saying like, can our school qualify? You know, it's like to get like, you know, it's like a student licenses and license for the school, because we actually it's a serious school that we are teaching, but it's a private school, right? It's not like something recognized by the government or anything. And then it's almost like they put like someone who doesn't want to think about it. It's just someone with the ready answer already. You know, it's like just search in the database. Okay, if someone asks me this question, that's what I'm gonna say. And the guy just said like, oh, here's a link to the website where you can see how to qualify and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, we basically, there's no way you can qualify to get licensed, because we are not like accredited, whatever, you know, it's like by the government. So see, that's why I'm going to talk trash about you. No, it's just like, man, I freaking love Maya, and I use it since version 1. It's been like 20 something years. But it never got better when it comes to bugs, man. It's like it gets buggier and buggier every version. It's like, it's so irritating.
Yeah, I'm using it for about 10 years, and yeah, it's same feelings.
Right? It's incredible, man. Like it's an expensive piece of software, but the thing is like the monopoly, right? Like they bought everybody, and then we are stuck with it. But I love the software. I mean, in terms of features, there's so much potential. It's just like they don't fix the freaking bugs. But they have to be careful because of things like you said, you know, Blender, for example, right? Blender is coming full force. There's I think like NVIDIA just poured like $2 billion or $1 million or something to help with the development. So yeah, people are start to pay more attention to Blender. I yet to experiment with it, but I'm very curious about it.
Yeah, I'm just learning it, and especially for render tests and doing tweaks, it's super awesome. I don't know how good it is with subsurface like Arnold and that high-quality renders, but I'm not rendering guy anyway, so I wouldn't be able to tell yet.
But I'm pretty sure it's getting there as well, right? Like, because I saw some very cool renders. Probably like the algorithm is not completely refined yet, but I believe like those guys gonna get there, man. I mean, like the evolution has been so many years they're, you know, cranking on that. Seems like the interface is much more interesting now. I think they copied a little bit of the XSI feeling to it, like the grayish rounded buttons and stuff. But some people I know complained about the interface already. So it all depends, right? Like how people are gonna adapt to it, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, it looks super cool. It's why I started learning it.
But yeah, guys, I think that's what I had for you today. It was based like just like overall looking of eyes and stuff. We already spoke in the past about like the rotation of them, the distance and all that stuff. So that's kind of covered already. But in terms of shader, that's basically, you know, all I can do is basically like explode all those nodes and show you exactly how everything is plugged and do the renders to show that basically, yeah, that's working with what I have. And your job is going to be to actually, you know, start setting up your own shaders and then copying all those parameters. Everything here when it comes to shaders was started from the AI standard surface, which is the Uber shader for Arnold, right? And it's just a matter of like plugging all the parameters I show you guys, and you should get like nice results. And if you guys still having trouble, you just ask Roger, because his eyes are looking pretty cool. No, it's looking awesome, man. And he did everything by looking at the videos offline. So I know that the information is in there, but I know that sometimes we just like skip one step and then all of a sudden things don't work. So I would just like say, like, if you're not getting similar results, go maybe like we step behind and then try it again, you know. And if everything goes wrong, remember that Arnold has this bug as well, that sometimes you tweak something and it doesn't show the result, doesn't change anything. If something like that happens, or for example, one object you just like, you're hiding and unhiding stuff constantly, all of a sudden like something stopped rendering, just remember to go to render and then run the update full scene, and then you should get everything refreshed, right? And another thing is that if you're using TX textures and all that stuff, which I'm not here, you can always go to Arnold. And then if you go to flush caches in here, you can do like flush all the textures or selected or sky dome, or you can do all here. So if you flush all caches, that should make sure that everything is completely reloaded, you know. And then if you do this one plus the update full scene, it's very unlikely that you're gonna get more trouble, you know. If stuff still look kind of funky, you can always like save your scene and then close Maya, reopen Maya, and sometimes like magic, all the stuff that wasn't rendering before, it starts rendering all of a sudden. So that's like kind of like the bugs we have to deal with, but I think it's worth it, you know. It's like for the most part things work, and the results are really good. So yeah, I would say like be patient with Maya, and we pray to the gods that they're gonna fix some of the major bugs, especially when it comes to XGen, man. I heard that one of the main guys working for XGen left the boat, like abandoned the boat, and is not working for Autodesk anymore. So hopefully they're gonna invest and put someone else in there. I already heard something about someone was saying today, someone who was not in our live class, but he was in the beta team for Arnold GPU actually. And he said that at the beginning, it seems like there was like a lot of excitement and stuff like that coming to the GPU part of things. But he said that all of a sudden, you know, it seems like they cut some of the investment for that development as well. And then now we are at, you know, Autodesk. We have to wait for their goodwill if they're gonna be, you know, it's like allocating some more money for the development of certain things, or if they're gonna just stick with their monopoly and we're not gonna see any development for a long time. So anyway, lots of venting today. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it's a lot of information and it's gonna keep going like this for a while now. Like every day we're gonna have a ton of stuff going on. And I don't even remember what we have for tomorrow, but let me take a quick look here. I think I have my, if I do a overview for October, I think I have like maybe like something, a preview or something. So I have the eyes, and tomorrow it's gonna be like, oh yeah, so this one here was for the previous class, which we were talking about the teeth and textures and shaders and stuff. So because we don't have teeth, we're gonna be talking about, unless you guys really want to, I can explore that. But I didn't see a lot of you guys, you know, building teeth at this point. So I think we can skip that one. And either we can focus straight away to XGen, or maybe spend one day refining things. I would actually rather use tomorrow, for example, to refine things and do more sculpting in my model, because we did some passes, but we didn't quite refine certain things. So maybe like do a full class you know, it's like of sculpting and refining eyelids and things like that. It's very important to have like the eyelids very tight against the eyeballs and all this stuff. And you know, we're gonna see like how we're gonna go tomorrow, but we're definitely not gonna be wasting time. We're gonna try to push these models further as far as we can. So thanks again, guys, and keep going with the awesome work. I'm loving seeing the progress, and stop kicking my ass, because my model right now is not good, and your models are looking too good already. So I'm gonna have to fire all of you guys. See you tomorrow, and have a great night. Bye, guys.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
See you, Chris. Have a good night.
You too, guys. Thank you. All righty.